It's said that the growth of the church is not in preacher power, rather it's in people power. Greetings, I'm Ryan Allman, the Louisiana North American Missions Director, and I would like to welcome you, your team, and your church to this year's virtual church growth conference entitled Nailed It. Change is prevalent all around us, and the urgency of the hour requires great intentionality on our part if we're to be successful in our mission to reaching the world. That's the reason over the next 3 days, we will fill our toolboxes with tools to help us do 3 things better. Number 1, reach. Number 2, engage. Number 3, evolve. Each day we will have both practical and powerful sessions aimed at equipping you, your team, to reach further, engage better, and evolve quicker. I need you to do something for me. Engage with us by doing a few things right now. Number 1, like. Number 2, if you hear something that resonates with you, comment. Then share this content with pastors, leaders, and friends you feel are ready to nail it in their ministry. Let's see what God is going to do in our churches as we impact our world and we see God grow us to the next level.
First, I would like to thank the Louisiana NAM team and their director, Brother Ryan Allman, for sponsoring and hosting this wonderful, much-needed growth conference. I'm so honored to address all of our pastors and all of our leadership teams, today. Concerning church growth, let me take a few minutes and just share the vision that we have here in Louisiana. Several years ago, our General Superintendent, Brother David Bernard, he shared his vision for growing the North American church. This vision is called the Strategic Growth Initiative. Now, this initiative highlights 4 areas where focus is being placed to assist the North American church to grow. Those 4 areas are multiplying the number of ministers, multiplying the number of churches, strengthening our ministers and our congregations, and the 4th initiative, of course, is growing our existing churches. Let's look at the first growth initiative, which is multiplying our number of ministers. There's a church growth principle that says the more leaders you have, the more followers you will have. That transfers over to ministers in this way. The more ministers we have, the more church planners we're going to have, the more pastors we're going to have, the more evangelists we're going to have, and the more missionaries we're going to have. And if we have more ministers, that is going to translate into more people coming into the kingdom of God. So it is imperative that we continue to license more ministers in the United Pentecostal Church. It will be part of the growth that we see in the kingdom of God. Now in Louisiana, we have nearly 800 licensed ministers. Most of them are involved as senior pastors, bishops, youth pastors, could be other ministries throughout the local church. Last year alone, we licensed 44 new ministers here in Louisiana. That's just remarkable. That's remarkable. That tells me that for the better part, our pastors are raising up new ministry in the church and allowing men and women to answer the call of God in their lives. I don't have the numbers for this, and it's not boasting, it's not braggadocious, but I'm looking at some things that I feel are factual, and I wish I did have the numbers for this, but I would dare say that Louisiana launches more men and women into ministry than any other district. And let me be clear about something here today. Some might say, well, you have way too many ministers in your state. Let me clear the air. Not only do we have a lot of ministers in our state, obviously, but Louisiana also sends out perhaps the most ministers outside of Louisiana than perhaps any other district in the United Pentecostal Church. You'll find ministers literally all over the world and in most states who have their origin back in the Louisiana district. So pastors, I urge you to have a strategy, first of all, to identify those who are feeling a call to ministry in your churches. And then second of all, come up with a plan to train those that feel a call to ministry. And then most importantly, you have to be ready to release those ministers to do whatever God calls them to do. Now let's take a look at the second growth initiative, which is multiplying the number of churches. The Louisiana district presently has over 300 United Pentecostal churches across the state. With our state's population at 4.6 million people, we have the ratio down to one church per every 14,900 people. Again, that's just remarkable. That is remarkable. But the fact remains that there's still millions of people in our state who need to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. We still need new churches planted, yes, in our metro areas, and we have several very large metro areas in Louisiana. But there's another thing that we need to think about, and that is our state is mostly rural. So we have to change the way that we're thinking about church planting. And let me explain what I mean by that. Our concept has always been, let's go to a place, plant a church, whether it be a daughter work or a new church plant, in an area where that church could eventually become self-supporting. But there are rural areas where we would plant churches or could plant churches that may not ever rise to the level of a self-supported church. So do we just ignore those areas? I think we shouldn't. In order to reach those people, our pastors are going to have to change their mentality of planting in an area only that would become self-supporting to planting in areas because there are people there, and perhaps call it an outreach extension where they plant a daughter work and they support it with ministry, with leaders, with musicians, etc., to hold services in those areas once a month or weekly. I'm asking our pastors to look out for 15 to 20 miles outside of their local mother church. And I want you to look into the rural areas around you and see if there's a place where you could plant an outreach church or a daughter work where you could send teams to hold services. Because over 700,000 people in the Louisiana district are located and living in the rural areas. As far back as I can remember, we have hovered around the 300 mark in total churches in our state. Why can't we plant 5 new churches, daughter works, new church outreaches in the rural areas each year over the next 10 years? And after 10 years, we will break the 350 barrier in total churches in our state. Our North American missions team can assist you in these areas if you're interested in starting a daughter work or starting a church plant. The third growth initiative is to strengthen our ministers and our churches. If pastors and leaders are not healthy in their walk with God, strong in their faith in God, and passionate about the work of God, then the church certainly cannot grow. I firmly believe that nothing can ever take the place of the unity that we feel and the strength that we gather from one another in the kingdom of God. Nothing brings unity like our district events, both in the section and district-wide events. All of our events are focused on strengthening our ministers and our congregations so that we can be better equipped physically, emotionally, spiritually to do the work that God has called us to do. Lastly, the fourth growth initiative is growing our existing churches. It is imperative that our churches grow. It is a biblical concept. It's a biblical principle. It is church growth is not an option. Church growth is a mandate. We are living in the most opportune times that we have ever seen. But I have to admit that church growth probably has not been on our minds over the past several years. But I want to say something that is that is very important to this wonderful group of ministers and leaders who are watching today. There should never be anything that comes against the kingdom of God or against God's church that should ever keep God's church from accomplishing His mission. When you look at the book of Acts, it is blatantly clear what God expects and what God demands of His church when it comes to the mission. From Acts chapter 4 all the way to Acts chapter 23, you find a church in distress. You find words like threats, beatings, the killing of Stephen, arrest. James is killed. There are stonings. There are times where they are left for dead. There are some imprisonments. There are mobs that are rioting in places against the disciples. Opposition was so thick everywhere the gospel was trying to be spread. But God will never stand idly by and let the enemy keep His church from their mission. I believe there's never a time where we're more protected and more blessed and more anointed than when we are busy in the kingdom of God, busy at His mission. So with great persecution that came upon the church, great demonstration came from heaven. The lame were healed in Acts 3. Many wonders were performed by the hands of the apostles when you look in Acts 5. When you turn to Acts 9, you find Peter prays for a man sick with a palsy and that has been bedridden for 8 years, and he raises him up and is healed. And in the midst of persecution, in the midst of pandemics, in the midst of hardship, miracles explode upon the scene. Tabitha is raised from the dead. Peter walks right out of prison led by an angel because the church is having a prayer meeting. Acts 12 says that God smites Herod and he dies. That means that God will take care of your enemies. You don't have to worry about those things coming against you or your church. God's going to take care of those things. The greatest persecutor of the church becomes perhaps the greatest believer. His name is Saul. Acts chapter 16, at midnight, Paul and Silas, they're praising God behind prison walls when God sends an earthquake that looses them. In Acts 19, Paul can't pray fast enough, so he hands out handkerchiefs that are anointed with oil and prayed over. And surrounded by trouble, surrounded by all these issues, surrounded by all these hardships, weary and worn down by the persecution, God added and then multiplied His church. So do you see this pattern? When things got worse, the church experienced greater harvest. Something is about to happen, brothers and sisters, in the kingdom of God. Something is right now in motion in the mind of God, the heart of God, and in the plan of God. We're about to see the greatest outpouring of the Spirit that we have ever witnessed in all of history. God is doing something very powerful and very intentional right now, not only in the world, but also in His church. You've got the greatest end-time promise, the greatest promise of all time, that in the last days, saith God, I will pour out of my Spirit upon all flesh. When the devil increases his trouble, when he increases fear and hardship, God will increase strength, God will increase miracles, and God will always increase the harvest. So let's get ready to grow, brothers and sisters. These are the greatest times. May God bless you.
I'd like to thank you for taking the time to be a part of this. This training is innovative, and special thanks to Ryan Allman for his vision and putting all this together. Now, the name is a good name. Nailed it. I asked him a couple of times now, what is the title? And it's like, nailed it. And that's exactly what we're seeking to do. We're going to be speaking about reaching, engaging, and involving. I will focus on the reach. As I was thinking about this, I realized that there is another word that can help us to understand this, and that word is stretch. As I thought about stretching, the question came to ask all of us, have we physically stretched lately? Now, that can be a challenge, but it's very important physically. When we speak about stretching, this literally keeps our muscles more flexible. It grows our muscles strong and much more healthy. But the real positive of stretching is it allows us to continue to have a good range of motion. Now, without it, our muscles shorten, they tighten. Really, the end result of it is pain, strain, and damage. Those of us that have had the age, the 40th birthday a long time ago in our rearview mirror, we had better get serious about stretching. If we don't stretch, we're not going to be able to sing the song with small children, head and shoulders, knees and toes. I heard one of my friends preaching not long ago, and the audience was not really working with him very well at all. And he said, now I guess we're going to have to stop and sing head and shoulders, knees and knees. He changed it because there was not any way that he wanted to even try to touch his toes. Now, we can talk about this physically, but unfortunately, a lack of reaching and stretching spiritually and emotionally limits our kingdom motion. To reach and stretch is to move out of our comfort zone. When we're talking about nailing it, when we're talking about building churches, expanding the kingdom, it will not happen in our comfort zone. It doesn't. Now, I know it's not comfortable to move out of our comfort zone, but the kingdom is not going to be expanded in our comfort zone. And the supernatural is the only way that ultimately it's going to be expanded. And we're not going to be able to obtain the supernatural, to operate in the supernatural, unless we intentionally reach past our natural ability. We see this in the Bible, in the book of Acts, when Peter and John encountered the lame man. It's in Acts 3, 6 through 7. Then Peter said, "Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I thee. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk." And he took the man by the right hand and lifted him up. And immediately his feet and his ankle bones received strength. This supernatural miracle involved a reach. But let's not miss the most important reach. Peter reached for Jesus before he reached for the man. And so really the most important point I'm going to try to make in this presentation is we must reach up before we reach out. How many times do we hear or we see, "Don't try this at home"? You know, it'll be some example of someone doing something wild, crazy, and then at the bottom it will say, "Don't do this at home." Well, when we're speaking about building the kingdom, expanding the kingdom, I would say, don't try this alone. Don't try this in the flesh. It's just not good. Many people that are a lot sharper than I am and a lot sharper maybe than you are have failed in trying to build churches because they were reaching out before they were reaching up. So we have to remember, it's reach up before reaching out. In the next several sessions, you are going to hear some very qualified people, and they're going to share personal insights and proven methods. But it does not matter what insight you hear. It doesn't matter what new method you hear. Don't make the mistake of reaching out before you reach up. Kingdom business can quickly become dangerous business when we reach out before we reach up. And so here's what I'm challenging you to do. We reach up for His strategy. We reach up for His will. We reach up for His way. We reach up for His weapons. 2 Corinthians 10:4, it says, "For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they're mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds." We are not going to be able to reach out effectively without reaching up. I know I'm repeating this. I know I'm staying on this point, but when we are speaking of reaching, we cannot afford to reach out before we reach up. There are 3 parts of kingdom reach that I hope that will just be driven into your heart and your spirit right now. 3 things. I'm not going to have time to dig down on all 3 of them, but just please remember this. Gifts of the Spirit, fruit of the Spirit, weapons of our warfare. Gifts of the Spirit, fruit of the Spirit, weapons of our warfare. We will absolutely never improve on these. There's no way to improve on the gifts of the Spirit, the fruit of the Spirit, and the weapons of our warfare when we are speaking about reaching and expanding the kingdom. We must remember, it's not by might, it's not by power, but it's by His Spirit. Now, truthfully, in this day and time, it's much easier to get a word from man than God. It's just a lot easier to listen to a man, listen to a woman, listen to a new idea, and then take all of the resources of time and energy and our God gifting and throw it all into man's idea. This is how the enemy wins and limits us. So the question is, what is a word from God worth? How valuable is a word from God about where you are at this time in your church, in your situation, with your abilities, with the giftings that you have, with the people that are inside your church right now? How valuable is a word from God? When we're reaching and we're thinking about reaching out, please reach up before you reach out. We literally must reach beyond man to know how to reach man. We reach beyond man to God to then know how to reach man. There are so many stories, and there's not enough time. But the story has been told many times. I'm sure many of you have heard it, about the early days with Bishop G.A. Mangan, whenever they were in the earlier days of POA in Alexandria, and how the Spirit led him to a businessman's office named Floyd Long. I don't have time to go into the whole story, but he literally, Floyd Long, the businessman, saw a halo around Bishop G.A. Mangan's head. That's because Bishop G.A. Mangan was reaching up before he was reaching out, and God led him there to that man that day. I was watching a series that Bishop Chester Wright produced about Spirit-led soul winning. He spoke of a day that God led him to go to an apartment complex. He stands out in front of the apartment complex and he says, "Okay, God, where do I start? Bottom or top?" And the Spirit said, "Bottom." He walked to the first door, knocked on the door, and a lady opens the door, and he looked beyond the woman and saw a man standing at the refrigerator with the door open and drinking milk out of a carton, half gallon, whatever it was. So he introduces himself, and she hollers over her shoulder and says to her husband, "Hey, we have a preacher here." And he said, "Well, tell him to come on in." So he said he went in, sat down, started talking. And he said, "I did everything you're not supposed to do." He said, "I spent 4 hours with them. And they were not able to come to church that week. But the next week, they walk in and holding clothes and towels under their arm because they came to be baptized in the name of Jesus Christ based on that conversation that they had had. They were baptized. They received the Holy Ghost. And that is how Bishop Ron and his wife, Linda Libby, came into the kingdom. It was because a man reached up before he reached out. This is not just a situation that is limited to men and women. It also works with land. I'm talking to leaders right now that you're concerned about facilities. You're concerned about where you're going to meet. What kind of a building are you going to be able to provide for your congregation? Well, there's a man we all love and respect in Louisiana, and he's gone on recently, and how we miss him, Bishop Ray Johnson. He told the story of how whenever they were in Donaldsonville in Louisiana, that the Monsignor got the word out to everybody, don't sell any property to these Pentecostals. And he said they tried to be able to rent property, or buy property, and they were not able to. And he said he had a dream one night, and he saw this house setting up on a hill with some beautiful land. And it was a very vivid dream. And a few weeks later, he and Sister Johnson and Billy were out driving the countryside, and he passed that house that he saw in his dream. And he immediately connected it. And so he pulled up into the drive and goes to the door, knocks on the door. A lady answers, and he starts to explain to her what he was there for. And she stopped him and she said, "You're a preacher, aren't you?" He said, "Yes, I am." She said, is your wife and little boy out in the car?" He said, "Yes, they are." She said, "Tell them to come in. Let's drink some coffee." They go in, and I believe Billy was 8 or 10 years old at that time. She begins to tell the story of how her husband on his deathbed 12 years earlier had told her, "You can sell all of our land, you can sell everything else, but you keep this land because there will be a day that a preacher and his wife and a little boy will come up and will ask about this land. They are the ones that are supposed to have the land, and you sell it to them for whatever they can pay." And she asked him, "So how much can you pay?" He said, "Oh, there's no way that we can pay what this land is worth." And she said, "No, you tell me what you can pay, and that's what you will get the land for." And today, there is an apostolic church on that land because of a man who knew how to reach up before he reached out. In Matthew 12, Jesus told the man with the withered hand, "Stretch forth thine hand." The word of Jesus brought focus to the dysfunctional part of his body, but the man was healed, but it took a stretch. In Luke 5, they had worked all night. They had caught nothing. And Jesus told them, "Go out again and cast your nets in this direction." And they had already done that. These were professional fishermen. They knew what they were doing. They had already been at that place. But what we realize is casting takes reaching. Casting takes stretching. Same nets, same place, but a God reach connected to a great catch. Some of you may feel like that it's already burned over where you are. So, some of you have already talked to people, they didn't bite. They didn't bite. But when you reach up, don't be surprised if God sends you right back to reach out to those very same people. I'd like for you to now, as I close my remarks, consider the greatest reach ever. The greatest reach, the greatest stretch, and that was our King Jesus on the cross. That was the greatest reach. That was the greatest stretch that has ever been known to mankind. That reach and that stretch was painful and bloody, but don't stop there, because it was redemptive. Here's what I trust will happen. I trust that as you listen to the rest of the instructors, I trust that you will first reach up with everything you have. Get out of bed every morning reaching up. Walk every day reaching up. And then as you reach up, you will know how to reach out. And I promise you, as we reach up and then reach out, the kingdom will be expanded. And in our natural way of saying it, we will be able to say, nailed it, because it will be done.
Hi, my name is Tennille Whaley. My husband Tyler and I pastor First Church of Pearland in Texas. It's an honor to be with you today, joining you for your Nailed It conference. And today's focus is about reaching the world around you. And I'd like to take a few minutes and just kind of talk to you about what worked, what hasn't worked at our local church. So we used to do the outreach model that most Pentecostal churches did. And that model was going out and reaching your perhaps neighborhoods that you didn't know anybody, and you would go knock on a door and you would have a tract and you would talk to them about Jesus, and you would try and get people interested in church just simply by knocking on their door and saying hello. But as we have found during this pandemic and during the craziness of the last few years, things have had to change, and we made those changes a few years back. But what we realized was that really the greatest way to reach somebody is through relationships. And the greatest way to get to know somebody, the greatest way to get them interested in the Jesus that you serve and that you know, is to get them interested in a relationship with you, because you are the witness. And so if you want people to want what you have, then you have to have a relationship with them deep enough that they know that there's something different about you and the God you serve. And so we have started small groups at our church, and we've probably started them 7 or 8 years ago. And I know. So here's the deal. Anytime you say small groups, everybody says, I tried that. It doesn't work at our church. And I'll be honest, we've done some small groups that haven't worked either. And what we used to do were like cell groups where based on where you lived, you were shoved into a house together and you watched a video together, and the only thing you had in common was that you lived close to each other. And so that made for awkward groups. Sometimes you would have like young marrieds hanging out with people with 3 and 4 kids, hanging out with grandparents. And the only thing that they have in common is perhaps they live in the same neighborhood, or perhaps they live close to each other. But we found that those didn't work. And so we started interest-based small groups at First Church. And let me explain what I mean by that. You already have small groups at your church. There are people grouping, and there are people meeting, and there are people hanging out, and there are people going and doing things together. You just don't own those small groups yet. And so what we did at First Church is we implemented small groups based on interest. And you ask, what's the difference? Well, the difference is that means that the people innately have something in common before they ever join together. And so perhaps it's a fishing small group. Well, only people that enjoy fishing would sign up for a fishing small group. And so you instantly have a connection and you instantly have cohesion. And so probably you already have that in your church. You probably already have people going out to eat together that enjoy eating at cool restaurants, or you have mothers that go to the park together because they're stay-at-home moms with young children and they do play dates together, or you have men going out and shooting guns together, or you have the crawfish boiling group in your church. Whatever group it is, you already have groups. Maybe you just haven't put a name on it and owned those small groups yet. So what we did was we said, all right, we're going to do interest-based small groups, and we are going to identify 12 amazing groups that we can start from the very beginning. And so this is how we started, and it started small. And we said, okay, this is 12 people that we know are going to commit to doing this, to being a light in their community and saying, all right, we are going to take ownership of a small group. And we said, okay, what small group would you like to host? And so we had things from, we had a knitting small group. We had moms at the park small group. We had small groups of men that worked downtown that all went and ate lunch together once a week. And the ask was, for 13 weeks, every single week, we need you to host a small group. And what we do is we say, okay, our church people, you can sign up. You're welcome to sign up. Join in with these small groups. But we ask that when you come, you bring somebody else that enjoys what you're doing with you. And so that's an easy ask. You know, you're not asking people to do something that's out of their comfort zone. So for instance, the men's small group that all work downtown, well, they all work downtown. They all eat lunch every single day. And so it's an easy ask to say, hey, you're a coworker of mine. Would you like to come join our small group? We just go eat together and just talk, just hang out with other men that work downtown. And so what we did and what we discovered was that when you can get people together based on one common interest, then all the walls are kind of broken down and they're enjoying the experience. If you have got people in your church perhaps that enjoy the end time prophecies, that's a small group that you could start. Or you can do a Bible study small group, or we have young people's doing small groups, and they get together and they just enjoy being together. And here's the deal, you know, everything we do, we feel like we should model the Book of Acts church, because that is our outline, that is our standard. And so, you know, the Book of Acts church, we read in Acts 2 where they talk about how, you know, they did everything together. They had all things in common, and their joy and their laughter is what drew people to the Book of Acts church. And so we feel like if we can get people doing things that they have in common together and enjoying life together, doing life together, then that's what will make the difference in small groups. And so if you've had small groups that have been unsuccessful, like probably every one of us have, I encourage you to try this new form of outreach called interest-based small groups, because what it does is it allows you to reach people in your community with an easy, low-impact invitation. And so we had one group that it was a group of young guys that all wanted to learn how to cook. And so all of these guys would get together and they would invite friends from school that enjoy cooking as well or want to know how to cook. And I mean, we started very basic, like how to cut up an onion. And a man in our church led that small group, and it grew and grew and grew with friends from the community and guys just wanting to learn how to cook. And you instantly got a group of men together that some of them were in church, some of them had never stepped foot in our church. And you got them together, and the only thing we ask that anybody does in a small group is we ask that if you're going to host a small group, at some point during that small group, ask if anybody has anything they want us to pray about, and pray together, and then be done with the spiritual side of it. Because what we wanted from it was we wanted them to get to know our church people. We wanted our church people to get outside of the walls and get connected into their communities. And what it did was it let neighbors connect with neighbors, and it let coworkers connect with coworkers and young moms. So our young mom small group that would meet in the park every single week, they started probably 4 or 5 ladies from the church. Well, if you've ever been to a park during a school day and you see 6 or 7 moms just sitting around by themselves because they're there letting their kids play, well, our ladies would wear their I Love My Church shirt, and they would all just go hang out in the park and talk to anybody that was there, any other moms that were there, any single moms that were there, any parents that were there with their kids, and they would instantly just connect, and their kids would start playing together. So that when eventually the invitation to church came, they already knew kids in the kids area, so their kids would have friends instantly when they walked in. The moms would have somebody connect with, somebody to sit with, and you're breaking down every single wall that they have, perhaps before they ever step into a church. And so that when they step into a Pentecostal church for the first time, they know people. They've been at a weekly small group with them for 13 weeks, and they've got kids connected, and they've got something in common. And we have found that the best way to reach the world that we live in is through relationships. And our small groups have flourished. You know, it's kind of been the health thermometer of church is how many more people in our small groups do we have than actually come into the building. And the greatest stat that we had right before the pandemic started, of course, was that we had more people attending small groups on any given week than we actually had in the building on Sunday. And so what that's doing is that's building a pipeline of souls that it's like we're reaching, we're making an impact. And, you know, the days of knocking on somebody's door, let me just tell you something. I'm not going to knock on somebody's door in the city of Houston right now. You just don't do that here, at least. I mean, we've got lots of guns, and I know all my Louisiana people, y'all do too. So I'm not knocking on anybody's door. I don't feel comfortable doing that. But if you want me to go meet another mom in a park and ask her if her kids would like to play with my kids, well, I can do that. And I can build a relationship with that lonely mom that's sitting alone at the park. And what we have found in the last few years is that dozens of families have joined our church just because they went and did something with our small groups. We have a group that does Taco Tuesday. And so every week they just go eat at different Mexican food restaurants together, eating tacos. And you say, well, that's not spiritual. Well, unless it is, unless being together with God's people is spiritual. And being around your church people is spiritual, and they see something different. And, you know, we always get that there's just something different about you. Don't you know that the God that lives inside of you is able to take something as silly as the Taco Tuesday and make it spiritual and reach people through tacos? And we've seen amazing things, and kind of the here's the logistic side of what we do. So we do small groups. And we do it in semesters. We run it concurrent with the school semesters. So we start mid-January and we go for 13 weeks, and then we break. And we do summer small groups, but our summer small groups are more like just getting together as church family, just hanging out, inviting people to come hang out, because we have a young church and our church members oftentimes leave during the summer to go out on vacation. So summer isn't a huge win for us during small group season, but then we start back up in the fall and we go 13 weeks. And what that does is every 13 weeks, we say, okay, this is your small group. This is what you're going to do for 13 weeks. You sign up to join. If it interests you, we have a ladies group that reads through a book every week together, and they get together on the week and discuss it. And then they'll read another book and discuss it. And so you join for 13 weeks. And this isn't a lifetime commitment. This is a 13-week commitment. And we say, okay, just be consistent and ask at any point, does anybody have anything we need to pray about? And that lets people know that are new, look, this is a church group. These are people I can come to when I'm in need, and they care about me and they want to know what my needs are. And so we do 2 13-week semesters. And in those, the way we divide them is, I guess the best way I could describe it is we divide them based on what would typically be known as ministries, meaning you have a women's ministry, you have a men's ministry, a kids ministry, youth ministry, prayer ministry, outreach ministry. So our small groups are, in general, they are either men, women, or family small groups. We don't do co-ed small groups. We keep it men, women, or whole family. And then we do kids and young people small groups. And so we have small groups of widows that they've lost their spouse, And they get together and go eat every week. And it just reminds them, hey, you're not alone. We care about you. We love you. Or we've got one small group. One of my favorite ones is a small group that we had that there was a lady in the church that was really good at crocheting. And we had a lot of young ladies wanting to learn how to crochet. They were having kids and wanted to learn how to make stuff. And so a lady in our church, her granddaughter was in the NICU at a hospital downtown Houston, and she was making her grandbaby a little hat to go on his head while he was in the hospital. And the hospital loved it and said, man, we need some more of these hats. These are great. All the NICU mothers want some for their babies. And so what this small group did was, it was multi-generational, but it was all women that got together, and this lady taught them how to make hats for the NICU babies. And in each hat, they would sew a little tag that says, First Church is praying for you. And they would take every week and go deliver the hats that they had made that week to the NICU babies. Because if you want to help somebody, you're there for them when they need something. And, I don't know about you, but I have found in the years of ministry that people come to church when they have a need. They don't come to church when they have it all together. And so if you can reach people at the point of their need, you are more like Jesus Christ than anybody else, because Jesus met people at the point of their needs. And so this small group kept growing and growing. And so they deliver hats to NICU babies all across the city of Houston, and just with a tag in there with the church address saying, we're praying for you. And so, the difference small groups have made in our churches is just immense. It's unprecedented, and it has created a church that loves doing life together. They love each other. They're not just walking into the building on Sunday and then walking out and then some little cliques go eat together. No, it has built a fabric of people that love each other and love doing life together. And so they'll be together in a small group, and then the next semester they'll sign up for different ones, but they're still friends with the ones that they met in the previous semester. And so it builds a culture of community. And what we have learned the hard way is that if you don't have a culture of community in your church, when hard times come, you fall to the depth of your systems. So if you don't have systems and processes in place, when all things go crazy, when there's a pandemic, if you don't have any way to connect with people, then you've got to find a way to connect people. And so what we did was we connected people through small groups, and we connected them with a way to join in the community. And we connected people in a way that lets them do life with each other. And so let me tell you my testimony at First Church. So during Hurricane Ike, which was about 12 years ago, First Church got hit horribly. And what happened was our roof got tweaked, and flood water and hurricane water got in. And as I don't have to tell the people of Louisiana, but I'll tell you anyway, hurricane water is dirty and it's not clean. And though our building looked fine, we were sitting in there for 6 months when air quality controllers came out and finally said, well, you have black mold. This was on a Thursday, and we couldn't be in the building the next day. And so we had to have church Sunday outside of our building. And for a year and a half, we lost people and we lost people as the church dwindled down to dozens of families. What was once a thriving Pentecostal church with choirs and 3 choirs. We had adult, youth, and children's choir that sang every service, and lots of focused on a church inward instead of a church outward. And so what it did was it allowed us to realize that our church was not healthy. Yes, our church was reaching Pentecostal people, and it was really making the saints happy, but we weren't called to reach saints. We were called to reach the sinners. And so when the hurricane hit, we found out how drastically unhealthy our culture was. And we decided that if we could ever get back in our building, that we would be different. And so a year and a half later, we got back in our building, and there was a handful of families we could have fit in one section of our building that seats 1,200 people. And it was demoralizing, and it was terrible, and it was heartbreaking. But we had decided at that point, might as well use this tragedy to do something good. And so while we were out of our building, we would have families call us and say, look, we don't want to go to church in a gym, so we'll come back whenever the church is built, but we just don't like coming to church in this old auditorium, so we're out. We'll catch y'all when you come back in your building. And what we learned is that our people didn't have community. There was nothing to keep them together. There was the groups that would go out to eat, but there was not the threading together of a church family like family is. And so during the next few years, we decided we were going to create a church with a healthy culture that was focused on others, that was focused on the lost. And we did that. And we spent years and years trying to implement systems of small groups and getting people involved when they walk in the doors. If they want to join a team, we have teams that are low level impact that we say you can instantly start serving. You have to go through a 4-week class and then you can start serving here at First Church because we want you connected. We want you involved. And so we took years to establish that system and that process, and we did. And so we had healthy small groups. We had healthy culture going. We had an invite culture that was easy. And it was an easy on-ramp because people were healthy and comfortable inviting friends to small groups. And then Hurricane Harvey hit. And you know how God does, because when you don't pass one test, he's going to give it to you again to see if you pass the second time. And Hurricane Harvey hit on an evening, and I posted in our family Facebook page, "Hey, First Church family, is everyone all right?" And we started getting texts and comments back, "Hey, we lost power, but we're okay." And then the post started getting a little bit more desperate. "Hey, there's water in my yard. It's getting higher. Okay, the water's now in my house. Okay, the water is up 2 feet." And again, I'm talking to Louisiana. I know you know what I'm talking about. And there was a new lady that had just joined our church a few months before the hurricane hit. And she was a lady that couldn't swim, and she lived alone. And the water was rising, and she was up on furniture in her house, and she had opened a window to try and get out. And she was up on the roof of her building, of her home, and she could not swim. And she had called the police probably 20 times. But the nature of Hurricane Harvey was they couldn't get to us. There was no way for them to get to the city of Pearland at that time. And so when people in our church started seeing all of this happening and started seeing the people in need, well, our small groups just activated. I didn't have to ask them to. My husband didn't have to say, "Hey, church, people are in need. We need to help people." No, it was completely organic the way it worked. And so Vivian had posted, "First Church, I need help." And I called her and I said, "Vivian, what's going on?" She said, "I'm up on my roof. I can't swim, and the police can't get to me." And I said, "Okay, I'm going to call one of our men's small groups." And we had a fishing small group that, of course, they all owned boats. And within 20 minutes, a men's small group showed up at her house and rescued Vivian off of her roof. But it wasn't just Vivian on her roof. It was a neighborhood full of people up on their roof. And so our men's small groups started reaching out and bringing all their boats down to the neighborhoods that were most effective and rescuing people off the small groups. Well, off their roofs. Well, they didn't have anywhere to go. And so all these people that were involved in cooking small groups just started showing up to the church and said, "Hey, the church still has power. Everyone come up to the church." And so we had hundreds of people just start showing up at the church with everything from their freezer that they no longer had power. And so we just started cooking. Well, as it turns out, there was a lot of people that didn't have food. And so the men would take the food out to the people in need and in their boats, and they were rescuing people off the roofs. And then our safety team that works every single Sunday said, "Hey, we just got word that the police officers haven't eaten in 48 hours. And so the women in our church that were on the cooking small group, the pastor's meal team, started cooking meals and delivering them to police officers that were in spaces that nobody could get to. And then we had a group of people that did acts of service for elderly people. Well, they found out that a lot of elderly people in our church didn't have a way to get their medicines. And so they were finding medicines and bringing them medicine and bringing them meals. And the moral of the story is that when everything goes crashing in, when a pandemic comes crashing in, if you have a healthy culture and you have people that love doing life together, and you have people that have something in common and love getting together and love serving together, when tragedy strikes, and it will strike, if it's not a hurricane, it's a pandemic, and who knows what's next. But when tragedies strike, your church will become the activators of great, amazing things in the community. And our church rescued like 1,300 people off of roofs. Our men's small groups just did it on their own. And as some of you may know, it attracted the attention of the president and first lady and his entire cabinet, and the governor and the senators all showed up at our church one day. It was like, we were just doing what we do. This is just who these people are. And the most beautiful comments that we could say was, this is just who they are. They just love serving people. And so let me encourage you, if you want to reach your world and you want to reach your community, you have to become an others-focused church. And you have to become a church that cares about the lost and the broken, but you have to have a way for them to connect and be able to join in with your church people and make a difference in the world, and watch what God will do through your efforts. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to talk to you today. God bless you, and God bless the great state of Louisiana.
Hey everyone, I'm so excited about being with you here on the Virtual Church Growth Conference. I'm super excited about what God is doing in our churches in the Louisiana district. I'm James White, and I pastor Crossroads New Life Tabernacle in DeVille, Louisiana. I also serve as the promotions director for the Louisiana North American Missions Department. And I am so blessed to be a part of this wonderful district. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about my story. Today we're talking about reach, and we have heard some tremendous sessions on reaching. And today, if you were going to put a title on my message, it would be Growing Your Church Through Events and Community Involvement. So I came to Crossroads New Life in 2010. The vote was cast with 35 members, and in May 2010, I became the lead pastor of Crossroads New Life Tabernacle, and I have loved it. It is an incredible church, and it's an incredible community. And both me and my family, we love it. And so I want to share with you just a few pictures of where we were, of when we started, and as we grew. From May 2010 to January of 2011, we grew to over 100 people. That was a fast growth. Easter of 2013, we broke the peak attendance record of this church, and we had 310 in that service. By 2015, we were consistently averaging 175 people on Sundays. And I tell you, it was exciting. We kept bumping that proverbial attendance barrier of 200. And believe me, that is a real barrier. That's a whole new lesson in itself. But we came back to DeVille, and I secured a job with a local TV station, and Susan and I started planning for growth. I came to DeVille with this attitude. It's not if we grow. It's when we grow. And so we started immediately planning events that would get people in the door. We cast vision, and we trained our 35 members to invite people to church and welcome them when they showed up. We simply rolled out the red carpet for our guests. We created a culture that when you walk into this church, you know you're loved. I wasn't worried about saving everyone at that time. I wasn't. Now don't get me wrong. I wanted to see everyone receive the wonderful gift of the Holy Ghost. I wanted to baptize everybody that came into this church. But I really wasn't trying to save everyone at that moment. I just wanted to get people in the seats. I just wanted to get people to walk through those double doors and come into this church. My plan was simple. Get people here, and if they come here, they're going to feel something special. They're going to feel what they like, and they're going to keep coming over and over and over again. Now, I believe that utilizing events is like dating. You're not trying to get married on the first date. You're not trying to get them to say I do on the first date. You're just trying to get to know them, right? And so utilizing events is like dating. Whenever I met Susan, we went on a blind date. I did not even know what she looked like. Yeah, it was crazy. And so I had a friend of mine who miserably failed at taking a picture of her. He brought back some blurry picture. I couldn't even tell what she looked like. And so I had no idea what she looked like whenever I was going on this date with her. And so whenever I pulled up to her house, I had been praying the whole time, God, please don't let her be ugly. And now I know I'm shallow. That's okay. That's okay. I admit it. I'm shallow. I just wanted her to be pretty. And whenever she walked out on that front porch, man, she was drop dead gorgeous. I loved what I saw. And I believe that guests are very similar. I believe guests are looking at our church and they're planning their visit and they're thinking and praying, God, I just want it to be a pretty service. God, I just want it to be, I want it to be beautiful. God, I want to go to a place that people will love me. I want to go to a place that people won't judge me. I want to go to a place that I'll feel welcome. And so I truly believe utilizing events is much like dating. You're not trying to get married on the first date. And so I want to jump right to this. What's important? That's the question that I want to pose to you. What's important? The first thing is attitude is important. I have found that church growth happens when we are willing to plan and work for it. Now you got to work for it. Church growth is not easy. It takes work. The fact is that in a relational church, in any church that's going to grow, it's up to the pastor to create the attitude for growth. And you know what? Our members, our leaders, they're looking to us for direction. They want to know, hey, where are we going? What are we doing? And so attitude matters. Every year I cast vision. I do a vision cast every year, and I create excitement about where we are going. I want our church to know where we are going. I want them to know what we're doing for our community, what we're going to do for our church members, what we're going to do for foreign missionaries and for North American missionaries. I want our church to know exactly where we are going. And if you're not doing an annual vision cast, then I want to urge you to make that a priority in your church. It's really one of the most important things that you can be doing as a church leader. Now, the second thing is culture is important. You will not reach communities, or you will not reach your community using techniques that don't fit your surrounding community. The second thing is culture is important. You will not reach your community using techniques that don't fit your surrounding community. For example, I have friends who pastor in the suburbs and the city, and potlucks are not popular for them. But I also have friends, and I also pastor in the country, and potlucks, they're the bomb. You got that 80-year-old who's been bringing chicken and dumplings for 35 years. Somebody knows what I'm talking about. Been bringing them for 35 years. And you just don't know what you're missing. Now, how many of you still have potlucks? Come on, put that in the comments if you still have potlucks. Shout out to the rural churches who are still doing potlucks, and also to the city churches that are doing it. But our communities are different. And so what works for one may not work for another, which means that you and I will need to know who our target is and what our limits are. So there's two simple truths that you need to consider. You need to know your target. You need to get to know the audience that you're trying to reach. Get to know your community. Get to know what they're like, what reaches them. Know your target. And then the second thing, you need to know your limits. Don't try to pull off an event that you just don't have time for, or you don't have people or resources for. You see, your events don't have to be just like the other church down the road. Your events don't have to match the church's events down the road. They don't have to be complex, or they don't have to be large and so big that you can't manage it. You can actually do them and scale them to a point to where you can actually handle them. Your events don't have to match the church's events down the road. They don't have to be complex like the large church events. When I worked for a local TV station, I had a boss that would meet us in the boardroom, and he would say this every single time. He would say it whenever he was talking about the client. He would say, kiss the client, kiss the presentation, kiss the day, kiss the week. He was simply saying, keep it simple, stupid. Now, I'm by no means calling anyone stupid, but I can say this. There are sometimes we complicate things to a point to where they just frazzle us and make us mad. But we need to keep things simple. It's easy. Listen to me. It's easy to keep things simple when you know why you're doing your event. Now, there is a myth. Small churches cannot plan big events. There's a myth out there. Unfortunately, I've heard this from churches, from church leaders, from people who attend smaller churches. We just can't do big events. We just can't do events like that. We can't do something on that type of scale. The reality is that too many smaller churches feel this. This is true for them, and they've adopted that mentality and that mindset because their definition of big events has become confused by what they see larger churches doing. Now, you may not have the money that a mega church may have. You may not have all the resources that the church down the road may have, but you can still do great events to reach your community and your city. So, if you can dream it, then you can do it. Just do it right. Do it with excellence, and you will find that your events will be a great form of outreach. It will bring people into your church. So here's an example of an event that we did. In 2020, our local school, along with other schools, they couldn't have a graduation ceremony. We have 7 acres here, so we decided to put on an outdoor event that would honor our graduates. So we went out and we used our billboard to congratulate the senior class of 2020, and we offered our campus as a place for them to celebrate their big accomplishment. Now the news station came out. People were lined up down the highway, waving at them as they came down through the highway for a parade. And they rolled up into this parking lot. They parked their vehicles, got out, and they walked out to our big field, and they all got together and they had their event. We have a community that knows we are for them because we showed them some love during a very difficult time in their life. Now, you may be asking, why should events matter? Why should we even do big events whenever it takes so much time and so much energy? Why should we even do it? Well, let me say this. A big event is a major step in the discipleship process. You cannot disciple what you do not have, right? You can't disciple if you don't have them. And so one of the best things that big events do for you is it brings people in, puts them in your congregation so that you can eventually disciple them. Now, big events also create opportunities for every member of your church to get engaged in their church. That means every person. Doesn't matter where they're at on their spiritual journey. They can get involved somewhere, from the parking lot to greeting to walking around and making sure you have enough chairs whenever you do run out of chairs. Everyone can get involved in big events. Big events that are successful will create excitement in your church and in your community. Big events, they create new attendance highs. And what I mean is this, that you may be running, let's just say, you may be running 50 before Easter Sunday. But if you put a lot of effort and a lot of commitment into getting people there, but also making your Easter service one to remember. I really believe, because it's happened for us, I'm speaking from experience, I believe that you were running 50 before Easter. After that event, you were probably going to be running 55 to 60. There's always going to be a new average after big events. That's the way we have seen it constantly here at this church, over and over and over. Now, big events create buzz. The best form of advertising is word of mouth, right? It's word of mouth. Give them something to talk about. Give them something to say about your church, and make sure it's good. That's why when you put together an event, you have to put it together with excellence. You want them walking away from your church saying they had it together. Wow, they made me feel welcome. Wow, they made me feel like I belong. You want them to feel that way, because the greatest form of advertising is when they go out there and tell somebody else about it. Now, big events can show your church what the future could look like. It's vision. It's automatic vision. I have people after every event, man, Pastor, that looked awesome. I can't wait till our church is this full. I can't wait till this is actually normal for us. And I just can't wait for that. It's instant vision. Big events also, they will stretch your faith, and they will put your faith into action. Whenever you put on a big event, you move, you do the work, you put together an excellent program, and then God will move. God will bring them back. God will stir them. God will convict them. Now, big events give your community the opportunity to evaluate your church, to see what your people are like, to see if you really are the friendliest church in town, to see if you really love people. Now, leader, I want to say this to you. Clarify your vision. Be sure to tell your congregation where you're going and why you're going there. You can only reach a goal if the goal has been clearly stated and clarified. So make sure that your goal is clear. And we do several free events at our church so we can love our community. That's what we do. We do a lot of free. When we do events here, we do mostly free. There are times that we will sell a few things here and there for missions or to help out a certain project. But for the most part, we're giving away free hot dogs. We're giving away free candy. We're giving away free hamburgers and free chips and free drinks, and we're just doing all of that. But you see, we're doing those events for free because we want to show our community that we love them. But our primary goal is to love our community. So the products for sale, they will not be the focus. You know what the focus will be? The focus will be loving our community. Now I want to jump right to an important note, and that is, when you have a big event, strategically place a sermon series after that big day. Now, big days for us is Easter, Mother's Day, Friends and Family Days, Pack the House Sunday. Those are big events for us. What we did this year, I want to share with you just real quickly. On Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday, that's our big Sunday. We pour a lot of money into that. We do a lot of free stuff. We do a lot of giveaways. In fact, we get our community businesses involved, and we do a lot of giveaways. And we pack the house on Palm Sunday and on Easter Sunday. In fact, this year we had more people on Palm Sunday than we did on Easter Sunday. Now go figure. And it was incredible. It was awesome. Just this past week, I had a young man, little boy, get out of his vehicle at the Dollar General. He remembered seeing me at Palm Sunday. Him and his mother came back for Easter Sunday. I told a story, a very personal story. He remembered that story. And he came and ran into the middle of the parking lot. He said, "Hey, preacher, you're the guy who talked about blah, blah, blah." And he just rattled it off. And I was like, "Yeah, buddy. hey, I'm so glad that you came to church. I hope you're coming back. And he said, oh yeah, we're coming back. And it's things like that that brings me joy. But you know, on Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday, we poured everything we could into that. We did it with excellence. And we promoted it and we planned for it. And then after that, what we did is we scheduled a series. It's an annual series that we do every year. And we scheduled that series. It's called Desperate Households Following Easter. Every Sunday has felt like a big Sunday since Easter because we have had so many guests coming to our church on these Sundays. It has been incredible. But what we did is we utilized a sermon series that really spoke to the people that were here on Easter Sunday and Palm Sunday. And so we're having more guests than we have ever seen in the history of our church, more guests returning after Palm Sunday and Easter. And you know what? You can utilize sermon series to do that for your church. Now, we put a lot of money into our Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday services, but the return on investment is so worth it. Excellence will make your big events great, and it will bring people back. So, big things are accomplished only through the perfection of minor details. That's what Coach John Wooden said. He said, through minor details. Excellence is defined as the quality of being outstanding or extremely good. So excellence is really about planning and executing the plan to the best of your ability. So a good team will always make your events better, and so you really need to have a good team. I believe that you should put your very best foot forward when planning everything at your church. Make sure it's the best. Make sure it's the best, because our guests, they deserve the very best. And that's what's going to bring them back. The events we plan will only be as good as we make them. Remember, attitude sets the altitude. Attitude is very important. When I took flying lessons, the altitude of the plane was determined by the attitude of the plane, by the nose of the plane. The nose of the plane made the difference on how the plane flew and where the plane was going. The same thing applies to events. The attitude of our events are set by the nose. It's set by the leader. It's set by us. I believe that we should give clear direction to everyone who is going to be involved in planning and executing the events. And it's the little things that lead to excellence. So make sure that you're doing these things. Make sure you're creating a plan, you're planning ahead, you're recruiting a team, you're advertising, you're executing that plan, and you're following up. That's right. You need to follow up because you need to know what worked and what didn't work. And so during this process, you should always inspect what you're expecting. And the relational church needs someone to keep them on track. It might be you, it might be your pastor, it might be the pastor's wife, it might be a leader who has the vision for this event. But whatever the case might be, it needs someone who is going to be passionate about keeping everything on track. Now here's a few examples of big events. Come Home Revival, the Greatest Grossest Lock-In, Community Easter Egg Hunt, Palm Sunday with festivities to follow Palm Sundays, Easter Sunday, and we use something called You've Been Egged. We found it on the internet, and Friends and Family Sunday giveaways. Make sure, child dedication. I can't say enough about that, child dedication. We open it up to our community, and we have people who come from the community to dedicate their children unto the Lord. Kids Revival, VBS, youth rallies, Women's Night of Worship. We use sermon series, and sometimes we create big events around that. A Church in the Park. That Church in the Park, we did that, 36 first-time guests to ever show up. Some of those 36 people are in this church today. Thank God for that. Community Prayer Walk. We've done community prayer walks for many years. Spirit Month, special days like Mother's and Father's Days. Now, I mean, there are so many things that you can do. That just scratches the surface. But that's really what we do. That's just several things that we have done through the years. Now, how do you get more people to get to your church? You get involved in your community. You get involved with the elected officials. Get them to like you. Get them to celebrate with you whenever you're celebrating. Open your facility up for community activities. Celebrate with your community on social media and be available and present in the community or the city every chance you get. I talk about celebrating with your community on social media. Use social media to show your community that you're for them. Don't just post about your church, post about your community events. Post about your school, post about the accomplishments, post about your whatever teams have made it to state. In fact, we go as far as celebrating and promoting businesses that is in our community, because we want them to know that we are for them. We want our community to know that we are for DeVille. And we have used our social media to do so many different things. And there's a session that's coming on Wednesday that you definitely want to hear. You don't want to miss Wednesday. You need to promote your big events. You need to put some money in there, because the return on investment, ROI, return on investment, it's worth it. It's worth every dollar you can pour into an event. Because when you put on good events, you bring them here, and if you do something, if you connect with them when they're here, you're going to see them turn into members. Now, you will need to make that investment into people. But it's not enough to just spend money on an event. You've got to create the atmosphere so that when people walk in here, they know they walked into a place that loves them. In our day, we have social media. That's a powerful tool for advertising. And so when you're doing an event, you need to advertise using every means necessary. You need to do everything you can to impact your community. Now, some of you may need some direction on graphics or video. And so my thoughts on this is, if you can't do it, hire someone to help you with it. Hire someone to help you with a video or with some graphics. If you want to learn or want to dive into doing this yourself, or maybe you have a little knowledge of creating video content or creating graphics, you can go to Canva. You could go to Envato, PicMonkey, Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator, creationswap.com. You can get video ideas from skitguys.com, sermonspice.com. And if you're wanting to learn graphic design, if you don't know anything about it and you want to learn how to put things together, you could actually go to YouTube and you can type in how to do a cool flyer, how to do a mock-up, how to do an event photo, or how to put together an event page on Facebook. You can type that in. Or you can go to Udemy and you could pay to have classes, to do classes. Again, I'll go back to hire someone. If you can't do it, hire someone. Social ads, do it. Don't just hit boost, but learn how to create social ads. You can directly target people in your community. Use your local television station if it's accessible. If it's a community event, you can go to your morning show and you can talk about it for free. Here's just a couple things. I'm out of time. I don't have any more time, but I do want to say this. I am passionate about church growth. I want to see every church grow. And I want to help every church out there that I can. Feel free to reach out to me by sending me an email at revjaw@gmail.com or reaching out to me on social media using Messenger. I'll be glad to reach back out to you, and we'll connect and set up a time and talk. I would love to talk to you about church growth, about events, about what we do here. And if it's anything that I can share with you, I am willing to share it, because I want to see our churches grow. I'm praying for you. May God bless you You have a wonderful day. Make sure that you check us out tonight at 7 o'clock. Also tomorrow and Wednesday. You don't want to miss it. Take care and be blessed.
Wasn't that an incredible group of sessions? God is really speaking to us right now. And we pray that each and every one of you were impacted by what was just shared. Here's what we need you to know. Tonight we are gathering again at 7 p.m. Write that down, schedule a reminder, and say, I need to join Louisiana NAM tonight at 7 p.m. for our main session. Our main session will include a powerful preacher who'll be declaring the word of the Lord to you. And I hope that you, your team, your church family can join us tonight at 7 p.m. God bless you. We'll see you soon.